Good evening. It's Wednesday, January 29th. It's 7 o'clock p.m. This is a meeting of the Utilities Committee. To my left is Councilman Bill Twist. I'm Alan Clark, and I'm chairing this because the chairman, Mr. Tremblay, is not available tonight. We're here as a Utilities Committee to provide a recommendation to Council regarding authorizing the Director of Public Service and Safety to enter into a 3-year agreement with First Energy Solutions to provide electric power generation to Troy households and small commercial businesses. Consideration of emergency legislation is requested. Mr. Titterington, will you be briefing us tonight on this?
I can start. I do have City Engineer Deb Swan, who wrote the recommendation, is in attendance, as well as Ray Stewart from Snyder Electric, who is our consultant and who analyzed and made the recommendation based on the RFPs that we received. Just to go through a little background, because this has been a long and comprehensive process, back in November of 2011, voters did pass the ballot issue when we asked whether or not they'd give us authority to do an opt-out aggregation program for electric service. In November of the following year is when we had Snyder Electric. You authorized them to come in as our consultant. In February, we started the paperwork part of the process, making submittals to the Public Utilities Commission of Ohio. There was a gap of time. We did receive the information that we needed from PUCO, but there was a significant gap in time until October, October, November, when PUCO was considering Dayton Power and Light's rate case, where they were doing a submittal to do some reorganization, change the way they did rates, to put it in layman's terms. They did make a determination on that case. That case and those rates then serve as a benchmark against which we can analyze the impact of other bidders. And so after that, Snyder submitted or sent out proposals, requests for proposals to 4 reputable vendors or potential suppliers, I guess. That included, I have the list here somewhere, First Energy Solutions, Duke, AEP, and DPLER, Dayton Power and Light Energy Resources. From the materials that you received, you will see that First Energy submitted the most competitive bid. Based on the analysis of Snyder, they included in their charts that First Energy Solutions, each vendor had the opportunity to submit 2 types of bids. One was a percentage discount on the tariff, and then the other was a unit price, if you would, a fixed rate unit price. They also had the option of bidding those 2 alternatives for 3, 4, or 5-year window of time. And on the, I guess it's page 1 of the PowerPoint that's included as your attachment, summary of bids, you can see that First Energy Solutions not only submitted the lowest or the best percentage discount, but they also submitted the, a better all-in fixed price, a fixed rate. Snyder is recommending to us, and we are recommending to you, that we go with the 3-year all-in fixed price for First Energy Solutions, as being the most competitive in providing the most potential savings to our residences and small businesses. And just a note that to be included, a small business had to generate less than 700,000 kilowatts, KHWs, per year. So that made them eligible to be under this aggregation program. I believe we included a chart in here from Schneider that I'm not seeing. It is the last page, the last attachment with the bar chart included, comparison to the estimated savings. You can see that the fixed price estimated savings would be 1.368 million. Again, that's estimated based on the rates that we can compare to today, by going with the fixed rate and by going with First Energy. We're asking for emergency because there are a couple more steps, or at least one significant step, and that is notifying people and giving them the opportunity to opt out of the program, to give them that window of time, but still be able to pass the savings on to them starting with the April billing. We're asking for emergency on Monday night. I don't know if there's anything else that we need to add, Debbie or Ray?
I'll answer any questions.
Mr. Twist, did you have any questions?
What is the current rate now that these residents would be paying, or do we have I didn't see that in here. Or do we have an average of what their rate's been over the last 3 years?
I don't have it in front of me, and that's a very good point.
I don't have those in front of me. Those are very good questions. I mean, we could back into it from the savings numbers for what the rates are today. The question, though, is whether or not what is it going to be in the future. The rate case that DP&L went through and was approved in January, or was approved finally, the tariffs were approved in December, that begins in January, set a new mechanism for how rates will be set. So what's happened in the last 3 years is not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen in the future.
And the residents do have an option to opt out if they would not
That's
want
right.
to do that.
That's right. So after selecting the supplier, awarding the business, the supplier will go through a 21-day opt-out cycle where every eligible customer, resident or business, will receive a letter in the mail and giving them instructions for how they would like to opt out. Additionally, if they get into the program and they want out, there is zero cancellation fees. That is part of the bid that First Energy provided, and is much more competitive than anything else we've seen from other suppliers.
And then how many residentials is this affecting, or is it, what's the?
Those are the numbers. on it.
Residentials, it's roughly, it was
fine.
included in an attachment, but 5,400 residentials
Okay.
and 480 businesses.
Okay. That's all the questions I have.
Mr. Twist, if I may add to that, it depends on your carrier also. Some may have Pioneer Power, some may have DP&L Power, or any other. Compared my bill to this, and it's so almost a 2.5 cents per kilowatt hour savings from Pioneer to this figure here.
Well, a clarification, this is only for customers that have not currently on a third-party supplier. So
Right.
these customers are receiving power from Dayton Power and Light directly, and so the savings would be compared to their tariffs.
Right.
Since you brought that up, this is meant to save our taxpayers money, the citizens of Troy, and I think that's really a good thing. My question to you, sir, would be, if in fact someone is already committed to, say, DP&L Energy, can they get out of that? and get into this.
Yes. So the process will be slightly different for everybody based on who their current supplier is. So when a customer entered into an agreement with Dayton Power and Light Energy Resources or AEP or Duke Retail, but
Right.
Pioneer Power, I think there's 30 or 40 suppliers that they could be with. There are terms and conditions that each one has, and they will differ by supplier. So to get out of that, they'll have to contact their supplier, determine if there's a cancellation fee. In most cases, there will. It could be as high as $150. It could be as low as $25. We've seen the range. Now, how would they get into this deal if they were to get out of their old deal? First Energy Solutions has agreed on a quarterly basis to go through the same process. So every quarter, they would look for new eligible customers that are not on a third-party supply agreement, and they would send out the letter, would you like to opt out? If they don't respond, then they would automatically be included. But that'll be a quarterly process of kind of sweeping those accounts that are for new accounts.
So, for example, someone in the community is with DP&L Energy, we'll just use them as an example, and they would get a letter 4 times this year saying you can change to us.
No.
No?
No. So you will only get a letter from First Energy if First Energy is awarded the business. You'll only get a letter if you're eligible to be included in the program. You're not eligible, technically, if you're currently in a supply agreement. Okay? To get eligible, you would have to leave your supply agreement, and then you would get a letter from First Energy Solutions asking if you would like to opt out. But once you opt out, you will not get any further notification from them. But again, they will only send it to eligible customers. So if you're behind DPLER currently, you will not get a letter unless or until you get out of that agreement, and then through the next quarterly sweep, you would get a letter.
So I just want to make sure there's some continuity for our citizens. So if I say I want out of DP&L ER today, who provides my power until someone else comes along, whoever we pick, comes along and says, I'm sending you a letter.
Yeah. So the default supplier in all cases would be Dayton Power and Light, the utility. Okay. So where current customers that are eligible for this program are being served.
So to run a practical example through, you started with DP&L,
Right.
now let's just use AEP.
Okay.
So we don't, because DP&L is our default.
Sure.
All right, so if I'm with AEP, I see an announcement of this. Well, let me back up. I'm with AEP, I've got a contract. So when the notifications are going out, because I'm with AEP and I have a contract, is it AEP had to contact or register my account with PUCO as having a contract?
It's through Dayton Power and Light, the utility.
Okay.
Yeah.
And they will notify PUCO, okay? So that, and it's kind of the same thing that we went through in 2013. PUCO then provides a list of all of our residents and small business customers who do not have a contract. So you won't even show up on that list. I won't show up on that list if I have AEP. So this comes along, hey, you're going to get a great rate, read about it in the newspaper. As an AEP customer, to get on board with this program, I would then have to call AEP, ask them how I get out of it, do the math, figure it's cheaper for me to go with First Energy than to stay with AEP. I pay my termination fee with AEP. Let's say it's 2 months before the quarterly deadline for First Energy. For those next 2 months, then I'm buying my power from Dayton Power and Light. During that time, PUCO now knows that I do not have a contract, and when First Energy goes back to get the updated list, I should be included on that list, and then First Energy is going to send me that opt-out notification. I ignore it. So, next thing I know, that quarterly deadline hits, and I am now a First Energy customer getting this discount. Does
So
that
it-
sound right?
That's
Well,
correct.
yeah, I appreciate that. If our citizens in our community have a question, who can they call, to help them resolve this? Can they call their provider, or you, or the city, or who can they call to get answers?
So there will be two parties that they can call. They can call their current provider, and that's who we would recommend that they call first. The second person that they'll be able to call, if First Energy is awarded the business, they will set up a 1-800 customer service line where customers throughout the length of the contract, if they have questions or concerns, that they'll be able to call and speak to somebody that's dedicated to the City of Troy account.
How is First Energy's customer service?
In evaluating their service for industrials and commercials across the state of Ohio, they would be considered a top-tier supplier in our recommendations for anybody.
I appreciate that. I'm trying to get good, this is a really good deal for our citizens. It's a great opportunity for them to save money, and times are tough, and this is really important to them, but I want to make sure that there's customer service that goes along with it, and they understand, the process. It's
Right.
easy for us to sit up here and say, this is what we're going to do, but for the average citizen, we want them to understand, what their choices are or not.
As a comment to that, First Energy Solutions, in terms of experience with government aggregation, probably has 85 to 90% of the government aggregations for electric power in the state of Ohio. So they are the most experienced supplier in terms of government aggregation.
Do citizens have is there a website or something they go to see sort of in the future what rates could be, or comparing? Is there any tools like that out there for our citizens that it could be reliable instead of a company saying, hey, we're best?
The Public Utilities
We mean
Commission of
it.
Ohio.
Yeah, we mean it.
The Public Utilities Commission of Ohio has some tools for residents and small businesses. They can usually look under something called apples to apples comparison, and typically, though, it's only looking at current bids. So it'll say, here are current supplier bids for 20 or 30 different marketers.
Okay.
That's on the PUCO website, isn't it?
That's correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, just had a quick question. If let's say you stop your contract, you still got 2 months until the quarterly letters go out, can you call up First Energy and say, hey, instead of paying this higher rate for 2 months, can I get on now? Or do you have to wait for that sweep to happen?
I can't guarantee what would happen. I mean, I think being proactive is better, right? And you have a better chance, but I can't promise that would happen.
So they may come back and say, nope, gotta wait for 2 months.
That's right.
Thanks.
Mr. Schweizer?
Yes, I just have one question. In terms of economic development, recently, one of our neighbors to the south was able to award a large piece of economic development because they were able to promise electrical rates. Are we allowed to do that as being the aggregator?
I'm not sure that they were able to guarantee rates. They did do some incentives related to their electric power. They're a municipal system, so they're
Okay.
not a market-based system. That's why, so they do have a lot of
Flexibility.
flexibility, if you will, on what they can and can't do, because they follow some different guidelines and rules, is what I understand.
They're not if they're a municipal utility, they're not regulated by the PUCO in the same way and fashion. But as Patrick said, you wouldn't have the ability to guarantee rates. And especially for small businesses, they could get onto this as a new customer. So in that sense, you could say, hey, you could come and join this, but they have to qualify under the conditions. I think in the presentation, there were 5 or 6 things that would disqualify somebody from being included. A national account would be one of them, for example.
So it's not an incentive that we can offer to somebody who's looking to come to Troy to set up a business of some sort?
Correct.
Okay.
And aggregation doesn't hit those kind of businesses. They're going to have the substantial electric use.
Okay. That's it.
Mrs. Oda? Anything?
When customers get their first letter from First Energy, is there a comparison for them that shows this is what you're currently paying and this is what you would pay with First Energy?
I do not think so. It's been a while since I've looked at the kind of the standard letter that First Energy would send out. I do not think there will be a comparison.
So they just have to trust that that's the better rate?
Well, I think that gets to the point of making sure that we publicize this as much as possible. And one of the steps that we'll take after final approval would be issuing a press release through the Troy Daily News.
So the city can publish what the rates will be, take a look at your bill, see if
That's right.
this.
Yeah.
Okay.
Or again, they can go to PUCO website, and do the apples to apples comparison. They offer budget billing too for people that need that, and consolidated billing, I see. I appreciate that. Mrs. Swan, did you have anything else to add to this?
No, you covered every aspect, and Ray has all the details.
Okay,
Mr. Chair,
yes.
can I get this retroactive before my next DP&L bill hits?
Mr. Swayze already tried that. The answer's no. Sorry.
Mrs. Baker, do you have any questions at all? Anyone else have any questions?
Mr. Chair, I have one more question. On a physical
Yes.
Basis, in my neighborhood, I split power between some other parties, and obviously I've stated I've got Pioneer. But on power outages, I've noticed that some of these other customers lose power and some of the rest of us don't. Do you know the physicality of how that would work, on
Yeah.
something like this?
Yes, this should not affect that at all, and you choosing Pioneer over a different supplier should not affect that at all. Dayton Power and Light will continue and is for everybody in the city of Troy, the utility, and it's their responsibility to maintain the lines, the distribution and transmission to everybody's households. And so it would my bet is it would be a system setup issue with Dayton Power and Light, the utility.
Yeah, I understand that part, but my question,
Just to add to that, because that corrects what you, to help answer
Okay.
your question. We do have a small area of town that is served by Pioneer Electric, which is a
Oh, it's
cooperative.
okay.
And so they are not part of this aggregation.
Okay, I apologize.
That's
Yeah,
okay,
it's a
yeah.
separate utility.
Yeah. and it's-
Okay.
But
and
this,
it's a-
this is only the electric, the juice, if you will.
Right.
There are other components of your bill.
right.
Right.
That's why, you see a 28% discount quoted, but in reality, it would only amount to about 15% because that's only one component of the bill. So this is just the actual electricity supplied to you, the poles and the lines and the infrastructure are going to be either controlled by DP&L or Pioneer.
But my question is, in that situation, when somebody's actually using a separate physical setup of distribution lines, changing over, then you would actually be using DP&L's infrastructure.
Well, and so Debbie clarified the situation. Customers that are behind Pioneer would not be affected by this. It is only by customers that are currently
So,
behind
okay.
Dayton Power and Light, the utility.
Okay, so that portion will not have any ability to.
That's correct.
Okay, got
Not
it.
eligible.
I apologize when you said Pioneer, I was thinking they're a third-party marketer.
Okay.
There are 30 or 40 of them in the state of
Right.
Ohio, so I don't
Okay,
know all the names.
gotcha.
I apologize.
Gotcha, okay.
I have one more question.
Yeah.
It says you're recommending that we contract for a 36-month term in order to take advantage of the premiums. What happens in 36 months? Do we revisit this again and see who's got the best rates, or is it like cable TV where we're sort of stuck?
No, you're not stuck. Yes, our recommendation to the
Stated
city.
right on the cable TV channel.
It is what it is, I guess.
Yeah. Our recommendation to the city, to Patrick, would be to go through the process of issuing another request for proposals at that time to get a competitive bid. And we believe this process of getting a competitive bid has given the city of Troy a better bid compared to other municipals within Dayton Power and Light.
will it be this long of a process?
No. So the length of this process was largely due to the uncertainty around Dayton Power and Light's utility tariffs. So we didn't have anything to compare to, and in meeting with the city, the residents and then the businesses and the council, the concern was we want to make sure this is a good deal for the city of Troy. And so we were kind of in wait mode until everything settled. And Dayton Power and Light, the utility, was fighting what the Public Utilities Commission wanted. And so it took much longer to draw out. We were hoping that this would be settled last March, and so we would be able to move forward last March. It just took until the end of 2013.
There's other communities that do this aggravation. It's getting quite popular now. I say.
Aggravation.
Aggregation.
I heard aggravation.
He said it.
It's a little of both, actually.
Freudian slip.
No, again, if I said aggravation, I apologize, but there's a lot of other communities that do the aggregation, and it's quite a cost saving to the citizens of the communities. I don't think I see any downside to this at this time. Anybody else have any questions at all?
Well, just one last question then, and this may be something that we actually need to discuss outside of the committee or council, but would we have to go through the same process if we were going to do the same thing with Pioneer, or could we do that?
Pioneer's a cooperative, so the same kind of thing I don't think applies.
That's correct. The same, Public Utility Commission regulates the investor-owned utilities.
Okay.
And they have some oversight over cooperatives and municipalities, but they don't fully regulate those. Those are regulated by the boards.
Okay.
Or the city councils. And so if Pioneer wanted to pursue allowing customers to do that, they would have to decide to allow that themselves.
All right, very good. And I don't think Melanie would misquote you back there.
Melanie would not misquote me, I'm sure. All right, Mr. Twist, do you want to move forward with this?
Yeah, I would support moving forward, taking it to council.
And I am also with emergency legislation is fine.
Emergency's fine.
Anything else come before the Utilities Committee?
No, sir.
Meeting adjourned.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Robin Oda. I am the chair of the Safety and Health Committee. It is September 29th, and it is 7...
January.
It's January 29th. 7:30 in the evening, and we are here to discuss again the resolution supporting the Regional Green Initiative. Do you have anything further to say?
Ma'am, thank you. Recognizing that there were still some concerns at the last council meeting, and getting a better understanding at that meeting where the undesirable language was. We took the draft back and tried to pare down the language to focus solely on regional sustainability, but more particularly green efforts in our community as they relate to the Dayton Regional Green Initiative, without any reference to Green America or an attachment or any of the social agenda that might be affiliated or associated with that national organization. Recognizing that, again, the focus on this is to continue to do what we've been doing, to formalize it in writing so that we can send the message to our business community, our residences, et cetera, that we are interested in continuing our efforts on recycling, reuse, et cetera. Saving, if you look at the DRG3, which is the Dayton Regional Green 3.com website, they focus exclusively on ways that residents, commercial, and industry can conserve through electric conservation, which in a previous committee was discussed, and aggregation's a good good way that we're trying to do that. Water conservation and some of the other natural resource conservation efforts. So this revised resolution draft that you have, again, takes out specific language related to Green America. It focuses exclusively on our efforts and the kind of goals that we have as a community while we support the Dayton region's efforts through DRG3. I also took the opportunity in several places to emphasize and reemphasize using reasonable, feasible, and cost-effective criteria when we're evaluating our own facilities and our own maintenance programs and our own equipment replacement, as well as in our efforts to encourage our community to do these things. We want them to remember that there are cost-effective ways to do it, and they may not want to just do it to be green at any cost, but reasonableness, feasibility, and again, whether it makes financial sense, all come into play as part of the criteria to make that evaluation. So that's what we tried to do with this latest version, and we are recommending that this version be introduced at the next meeting as an amended resolution. Logistically then, according to the law director, if this is to be introduced, then it would be it would be amended at the next meeting and carried forward to a third reading for deliberation at the following, the February 18th meeting. I think that's it.
My turn.
Sure, go ahead.
No.
Now, I appreciate that you have reworked this 2 times now. And, but before anybody else says anything, I will just say that I still find it overreaching and not something I'm sure that I want to push our city towards. I think we get into a lot of the recycling and things without the document. You can reword it, but the organizations that developed it in the first place still exist. And when you look at that stuff, it's kind of scary.
Are you talking about the Green America?
The Green America, even...
Well, they're not the ones that, I just want to clarify, they're not the ones that drove this resolution. They were an example of a national organization that does these kind of efforts in addition to the broader agenda that they have. But that was just a national example. The driver of this is the Dayton Region Green.
And I've been on that
initiative,
website,
so,
and I've been on the Miami...
I just want to clarify that, that's all.
Thank you. I mean, that is helpful. And do you have any comments?
Yes. yeah.
Questions?
I actually, I do. Thank you very much. I guess, we as a community are already very green. We've saved the taxpayers lots of money by doing green things and recycling and rehabilitating and repurposing and all of that. My concern is, what does this mean to Mr. and Mrs. John Doe out there, number one? Number two, if we as a city council stand there and vote no against this, what does it mean? What happens? Does the world come to an end?
Okay, I think there's at least 2 questions in there, so I'll try to
Right.
separate them. First of all, to Joe Citizen, as we all know, most of our citizenry just do their own thing, and unless there's an issue, they don't worry one way or the other. So I would be willing to bet that while we know that we constantly are looking into conservation efforts, and we include those kind of criteria when we evaluate programs, projects, equipment purchases, and replacements, odds are that most people don't in this community. This is an opportunity to make that statement in writing and have it on the record that, yes, we've been doing this and we are going to continue to do this. As a part of that, it's not just Joe Citizen, though, that we're trying to send a message to. It's to our industry and commercial enterprises here in town, particularly our international businesses who have for a long time and in a much greater way than America has, by necessity, had to do these kinds of things. And so when we can say to our Japanese companies and our German companies, among others, that, hey, you know, we understand you guys have been doing this. In some cases, nationally, we've taken their model and applied it in the United States. And, you know, we not only appreciate their efforts, but we want to model after what they've been doing and try to emulate them and try to be as green and conscientious environmentally as possible. So it's a pretty powerful statement, I think, and maybe more powerful than what we might appreciate. If we vote this down, I think it sends an unintended message that we don't want to send. Because through our discussions, it's been all about really the language and what's included and what's not. It's not about the concept of conservation and green and sustainability and the whole thing. Nobody has stated, at least publicly on the record, that they're anti those initiatives. So I think voting down could be perceived as saying the opposite of what you want to say. So at most, I would think that just tabling this legislation would, I think, be the most that we would want to do without sounding contrary. There is no, there's no penalty provision by passing this. There's no penalty provision if we're not green. If somebody thinks that we should be green, but we've decided that it's not cost effective, it's not reasonable, it's not feasible, whatever, that in that particular instance we don't want to go the green alternative, we want to go a different direction, there's no penalty whatsoever for us doing that. It's still a local decision, it's still a project by project decision.
How many cities have been asked to look at this?
Every city in the Miami Valley has been asked to look at it. Several have already passed it. Some are still considering it like we are. About a week and a half ago, there was a regional press conference that they did with the city of Dayton and Montgomery County. Forgive me, I didn't count the number of cities that were there, but there were several of the Dayton suburbs that were there in attendance in support.
Have any
Since
cities
we were
said
still, since we were still deliberating this, didn't feel comfortable showing up there, so Troy was not represented at that.
Have any other cities said no?
Not that I'm aware of.
Which cities have passed it?
I can get you that list.
Okay, yeah, I'd like that, but again, I mean, we are not, as a council, we are not anti-green, and we do lots of what's on here, and again, we've done this to save the taxpayers money, and I would think that ultimately, that, looking at this, implement green streets principles, promote new LEED buildings, I mean, that sort of stuff, create natural habitats on city. I mean, this is all stuff that we already do already, and I'm not so sure that, some of the other things on there make me warm and fuzzy, but, most of the stuff, like I said, we already do.
Well, this is, if you read the section, it says we're going to encourage the green efforts included below. That doesn't, we don't have LEED buildings. We haven't had to have that analysis yet. We haven't had to do those kind of retrofits. The last time we did this was, I want to say, 15 years ago, when we did some major upgrades to buildings. The standards were, a lot different. There wasn't the kind of energy efficiency technology out there that there is today. We did what we could, but we don't have any LEED certified buildings. So we haven't been doing that. We don't have, what was the other one that you mentioned?
Green Streets Principles.
Green Streets Principles, we have some of those. You know, we continue to modify our subdivision regulations and add new standards as we go along. So there are a lot of more opportunities that we will have in the future. And again, this is just stating our intention to look at those principles as part of our evaluation process.
Well,
Not say that we have to do them, but that will just be part of our analysis.
And it says in here, the city of Troy will encourage the green efforts below where cost-effective and reasonable, but which are less measurable but worth encouraging.
You know, some of those on the list are not the kind that you could just easily
Right.
quantify.
Right. And I guess my example was the, compressed natural gas charging stations or purchase CNG or electric vehicles. So,
Well, and that is one that's potentially quantifiable.
Right.
You know, but we have to compare conventional vehicles and their ongoing maintenance costs versus the somewhat higher purchase costs of the alternative fuel type vehicles versus the ongoing savings that we would have. Those are the kind of things that we would do as part of any analysis.
Mark, do you have any comments or questions?
Yeah, just a few quick ones. As I was looking at this and thinking about it, and I supported it before, but as I kind of dug in and got some more information, I've kind of gone the other way. So I'm kind of trying to compare, okay, if I put everything, why we should do this thing in one hand and why we shouldn't in the other, there's been some connections with some groups that I don't think that I agree with. There's been some different things. So I found reasons why I don't want to do it. And if I try to outweigh that with reasons why I do want to do it, there's not a whole lot there. Okay, so we want to say that we want to play and we say that we want to be green. Do we really need to sign a big contract saying we will? I mean, I want to go to the gym more in 2014. That doesn't mean I'm going to sign a big contract saying I will. So I don't mind. Yeah, I like being green. That's fine. But I don't see why we would commit ourselves to it if we're already doing it. And I can't imagine, I'm not sure, I've never been involved in that process, but I can't imagine that a company in Germany is going to look at us and say, you know what, you have done all these things, but man, that contract you didn't sign back then, I'm not coming. And I feel like we're still doing everything. We're still trying to be green. We still want to be green. We're still doing all these initiatives. What's with the piece of paper? I mean, why is that necessary? Why is that, validating what all we're doing? I think we're already doing it without the paper. Why do we need the paper when there's some negative connotation to it? I'm feeling the outweigh going against it more than for it, for myself.
Well, Mr. Heath, my understanding was that your objections were related to the Green America part of this. And again, this resolution took all of that out.
Mm-hmm.
That is not referenced in this resolution at all. So again, we refocused it
Right.
on our efforts, the regional efforts, the Dayton Regional Green efforts, period, end of story.
Mm-hmm.
Any other comments?
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may. Well, I'm going to take a little bit different tack than Mr. Brock in that initially I was non-supportive at all because of the attachments. But if you stop and think about the move from the governor's standpoint in cooperation and collaboration on utilities and uses with cities and counties throughout the state, and how local control to some degree is trying to be consolidated in many pots. This kind of ties into that in that sort of way, and we're still grabbing hands with Montgomery County or other groups, and that we're going to support something like this. And my harm at the time was the same probably as yours, was the connections with some some organizations that just weren't out sending out a pro-business economic development message. And I don't see really any harm in this in a resolution that is just basically stating what we're doing without any direct ties with negative organizations. And it's also tying in on the state scale at a local level of we're cooperating within our region and willing to look at things and encourage those things without binding us into a contractual basis. And that's what resolutions really are. They're just kind of statements of what our intentions are generally. So I'm really assuaged, in my opinion, by the removal of those really huge negative things that I saw initially. And so I'm kind of leaning the other way from what you are, but with some concern, of hearing what the other side is. So I mean, I do agree with some of that, but that's my kind of personal opinion, and where I've changed my thinking from that particular thing tying us to some negative connotations, and then looking at it in a regional and then a state level type atmosphere instead of just us. So that's kind of my take on it.
Yes, Madam Chair, if I may. I think Mr. Phillips is right. I was against it vehemently at first, especially when you tied in Green America. But I also think that this is, as it stands right now, this is better than a zero. I think if we're going to play on the world stage as far as trying to get economic development in Detroit, we've got to do something, and I think this is that something. I don't know if I'm completely behind everything that's in here, but it's enough that I can swallow. I don't know if Section 4 and 5 totally, if there's everything in there that I really like. I don't know if certified green business, I don't know what that exactly means, other than that's just going back to the DRG 3. And then everything else in here is just on a regional basis. So if somebody were to say, put in a river corridor amenity down in West Carrollton or Riverside or wherever, that would be okay. That would satisfy this.
That would be counted.
But yeah, this is a lot better than what it was. We're not targeting any businesses like we were before. This is a real good compromise here, as far as I can see.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
addressing Mr. Schweizer's comments, Section 4 and G really concerns me, development and/or redevelopment of riverfront corridor amenities to promote economic development, including adding one new or improved water trail access site, 3 bike trail connections, and increasing by 10% the number of cyclists using trails. We have not talked about Treasure Island, and my concern is that this is where this is going, and it's, potentially trying to get us committed to spending a lot of the taxpayers' money that we may not, be willing to spend.
That section came from the proposed, I guess, the template resolution that was presented to us that had nothing to do with Treasure Island or any particular potential development other than the continued maintenance, update, and expansion of the bike trail system. That's my understanding when I talked to the leadership behind the authors behind the original resolution. So in our case, our promotion of that for the last 2 years and probably the next many years, we have been investing in maintaining and updating our bike trails, sections of the bike trail. That is one piece that falls under G. We continue to work with the Miami County Park District, MVRPC, on making the final or assisting in any way that we can in making the final connections of the bike trail between Sydney all the way down to Cincinnati. As you know, Mr. Clark, we only have 1 or 2 left to go, and at least one of those is under construction right now. It's those efforts they're talking about. Again, they're not talking about any specific targeted project. And if you want to talk about Treasure Island, it goes back to, is it reasonable? Is it feasible? Feasible, and is it cost effective? And that is a discussion that we will have
Right.
second quarter of this year.
It is an aggravation.
And that's why I made sure that I peppered this resolution with those words so that we understood each project is evaluated on its own merits.
And I'm glad to hear that, because I would hate to have this come back being thrown in our face to say, well, you committed to it.
You're making no commitments in this resolution.
Good, good.
Mr.
Madam
Twist?
Chair? Yeah. I think, overall, one of the reasons I think a lot of our citizens enjoy living in Troy is because of our green spaces, because we have the Miami River, because we have an environment that is good for families and activities to be done in our park systems. So when this was reworded, I would say I'm in support of that because I think it encourages our citizens to maintain that for future generations. And we're getting behind, like Mr. Phillips said, a regional group to help the whole region, which will help, I think, sustainability for our region, which is a good thing. And I would agree with Mr. Schweizer there. On economic development, I do feel your more modern companies, younger people, maybe startup companies and those types of things, are looking for communities that would have some type of going green or have some type of activities that their companies could participate in and be a part of. So I feel this resolution, you might not be in 100% agreement on all of it, but overall, we have benefited from people taking care of our own resources here in Troy. Our families have for many generations. So I think this resolution is just a commitment to keep that, to me, is a commitment to keep the green space and to help as much sustainability. And I think with the cost effectiveness, that's a lot better, that each one of those scenarios will come to us. And again, I feel all these things are for a region. So an update of one bike 3 bike trails could be in another Miami Valley region, doesn't necessarily have to be ours. One water access could be put a dock for a kayak. It doesn't have to be a huge $20 million project. So I think it's encouraging people maybe to start small, and who knows where that can lead to. So I would be in support of due to the changes that were made for those reasons.
Madam Chair.
Mr. Heath?
Yeah, just had, a lot of my concerns have been answered here. I appreciate all the dialogue back and forth. I just have 2 last quick things, Mr. Tiddington, if you don't mind. The big concern, it was obviously mine, and you mentioned it, that I didn't want to support that other group. So I don't want to make it look like we are, or that we are in any way. On the 30,000 Facebook fans, is that DRG3's Facebook fans? It's not this other group's Facebook?
No, that's correct.
Okay. Like I said, didn't want to look like we're supporting them. And then going back to your expertise, what you've seen and everybody in this group has seen, the overseas companies, are they, I don't want to send a wrong message to those guys, because obviously we've done a nice job. TDC has done a nice job getting companies here, and I think it's helped Troy huge, and we obviously want to continue to do that. So is this other companies, when they're looking at a region, they want to see green? My concern is I don't want them to say, geez, green sounds expensive, I don't want to have to comply to these things and maybe cost them more money, or are they like to see green areas?
What we've found in our companies that, are the overseas companies that have been expanding here in Troy, is that it's, in every case, green initiatives is part of their baseline analysis and has been for several years. And it's because it's ingrained in their culture. They brought it across from Asia and from Europe with them. So it can only help our status with them if we have something like this in place that focuses only on the green, the sustainability, and the conservation efforts, and none of the other social agenda, because you know, to speak of Asia, if you ever have the chance to go there, one of the things that you will notice is that there are as many recycling bins as there are, and probably more so now, than there are trash receptacles. If you're going to eat in the native way, the native menu, so to speak, they use, cook, serve, sometimes not cooked, but serve every part of whatever animal or plant they happen to harvest for that particular meal. In the case of Japan, 85% of Japan is uninhabitable, so they have a fairly large population in 15% of the area, and they are totally surrounded by water. So they have long understood the need to conserve, recycle, reuse, whenever and wherever possible. So in this case, you know, this does reinforce our commitment to them, that, you know, we are partners with them. We have our sister city, for example, and they do appreciate these kind of efforts, and knowing that we are understanding of how they are, and that we share their concerns for all these issues. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I appreciate it. I lived in Japan for a year with the military, but I was mostly in the jungle, so I didn't see anybody recycling. Yeah, I appreciate that. That helps some of my concerns.
Mrs. Baker? Anybody else in the audience?
I'd like to move forward to bring this to council.
Yes.
I am still going to vote no. It's too close to crossing the line for me. Too overreaching. So I will file a
She'll have a
minority.
minority.
I will draft that, but then we will be prepared to submit an amended ordinance, or amended resolution.
That's fine.
Who submits that? If the chair isn't going to submit it, who's going to submit that? One of the two committee members?
Yes, and we'll work out those details with the director of law.
I wrote it.
Have
I read it the
exactly.
last time. Was I not supposed to?
I'm sorry?
I read it the last time. Was
Well,
I
you're
not
talking about
supposed to?
introducing the amendment.
That would be, they'll pick a motion.
The amendment to
There'll have to
the
be a
resolution.
motion to amend the existing resolution for this new resolution. But we will make sure that we have worked all that out with the director of law, the proper procedures.
Save a lot of attitude.
Okay. Anything else?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we're adjourned.
Thank you.